Today on CityCast Chicago, the Damen silos are officially coming down. The city issued a demolition permit for the Southwest Side icon, and owners say it'll take about 6 months. But neighbors are worried about environmental impacts and any future redevelopment. So we're talking about how we got here and imagining what the future of the silos could be. It's Monday, July 7th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I'm joined by CityCast Chicago producer Michelle Navarro. Welcome back to the podcast, my friend.
Hey, Jacoby.
So the Damen silos have sat abandoned for nearly the last 50 years. Most people know it as a makeshift graffiti park since it's been long out of its heyday as one of the city's massive grain elevators. But for the last 3 years, there have been talks about demolishing this structure. Michelle, you recently attended a community meeting with the city to talk about the Damen silos. Can you talk about where that plan is right now?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, it has been abandoned for a while, I think since 1977. And to give you an idea, these silos were built in 1906. And so in 2022, the state basically put the building up for auction, trying to get rid of it to get some money from it. And the state sold it to the highest bidder, which was Michael Tandon Jr., who is the owner of Matt Asphalt. Matt Asphalt is a company. It has an industrial plant in the same neighborhood in McKinley Park, right across from the actual park. And the company has been under scrutiny for some time by the neighborhood for being one of the largest industrial polluters. Matt Asphalt, like I mentioned, is a hot mix asphalt plant. Asphalt is being used for roads, that kind of thing. And it's next to a school, next to a 69-acre park, and of course, a bunch of homes. My home being one of them. Back in 2020, there was a lawsuit, and in 2023, Matt Asphalt agreed to pay $1.2 million in the class action settlement. They had a separate settlement in 2023 with the Department of Public Health for pollution and dust control violations. And so Matt Asphalt has been It's been controversial for the area for what it's done to the community and how it's affected residents. The McKinley Park Development Council, made up of local businesses, advocates, and residents, have been advocating and saying, hey, we're worried. We don't want, the area's largest polluters to do whatever they want with this piece of land. Just last month, Borderless magazine came out with an investigation that last year they installed new mitigation technologies, but the investigation found that city inspectors were still detecting odor and smoke emissions from the plant. And so this is all kind of going in the background of a lot of residents, community members, advocates are very well aware of the new owners of the Damen silos.
About a week after this meeting, the city issued the demolition permit. What did city officials say about their plans before the permit was issued?
Right when the community meeting started, they made it very clear that they had no say in the auction and who was going to be the new owners, who was going to be allowed to buy it. And they also said, we can't answer questions about why this can't be preserved, why it didn't qualify for landmark. They strictly said, we are here to talk about environmentally complex demolitions, which is the category in which the Damen silos is in. It's complex because, one, it's literally right on the Chicago River. If you've ever seen it from the I-55 or from the Orange Line, the land is literally on the south branch of the river. And also, it's in a residential area, right? So just over the Damen Bridge, past the Target, there is a whole, residential neighborhood. And so this, of course, brings a lot of worry to residents because of that. The reason why they're having this meeting is because Matt Asphalt has submitted permits to the city, basically asking, hey, we want to demolish this. And this is what everyone goes through when they want to demolish something. There is a set of rules and regulations that they have to go through, a process. So the meeting was held by city officials like the Department of Buildings, which deals with these permits, the Department of Public Health, so Dr. Simbo Ige was there. There's also one representative of the current owner, his attorney, and a third-party contractor who will take on the task of the demolition. And so they were all each kind of presenting what their part of the process was going to be. They also made it clear that they have no idea what the new owner is going to do with the land, which was also very alarming to people because they say, okay, clearly you're going to demolish it to make space for something, but we don't know what. And their attorney was kind of saying like, hey, the reason why we want to demolish it is because there's a lot of trespassers on here. Like you mentioned, this is a hot spot for like urban explorers. Like people in the city love going to the Damen silos. They love visiting them because it is such an iconic spot. A lot of graffiti artists, there's a lot of memorable art on it. And so on the owner side, they're saying, hey, there's people that are trespassing. We don't want people to get hurt. We want to tear them down because they are deteriorating. I mean, these are multiple abandoned buildings that have not been taken care of for decades.
Did they talk through with residents what that demolition would look like? Because we know there's a lot of concern, not only because the owner is a known polluter in the area, but also, there was an incident a few years ago when an old industrial factory was demolished, and it rain dust on the entire neighborhood of Little Village. Of course, I'm talking about that Hillco demolition, the April 2020 implosion of the Crawford coal plant at 35th and Pulaski.
So residents in the meeting brought that up, and they were kind of like, how do you not expect us to be worried? How do you not expect us to be concerned when this just happened a few neighborhoods over? And they made it clear that the mission for this demolition is that all dust is controlled. And that's exactly like verbatim what Dr. Ige said, that all dust is controlled. And it's really hard to believe that when you say that because it's dust, right? But something they said is that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has cleared the process for using water from the river to weigh down the dust. They will have a third-party monitoring company keeping track of air at the site at all times. There's a total of, I think, 5 buildings on the site. And so their plan is to have 2 people per building to ensure that each building, the dust is controlled, that the air quality is not dangerous. And it will have reports of the air in like 15-minute block intervals. So every 15 minutes, it will take track of the air. And so if they ever get an action level where the air is deemed to be dangerous, they are supposed to halt the whole process. Everything is supposed to come to a halt, and they're going to try to do what they have to do in order to keep the air from, getting even worse. They also made it very clear that they will not be using explosives in this demolition process because, again, it is an environmentally complex demolition, that they will be using cranes and excavators to basically break the building part by part. And of course, we talk about the Hillco demolition in Little Village back in 2020, which caused this massive dust storm all over the community. Hillco denied that it violated the law. They later settled.
There was like a $12 million settlement.
Yes, to residents who were affected by the dust. There was a concerned resident who brought that up, and they directly asked Dr. Ige, like, what did you guys learn from that? And the reason why they're going to be monitoring the air closely and at all times on the site is because they didn't do that back in 2020. They didn't have someone monitoring the air as closely as they should have, and that was their biggest regret, and that's where they found themselves to neglect the community and the air.
I appreciate Dr. Ige for taking that question right on the chin, because she wasn't even in that position when it happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. And a lot of officials at the time, people on the planning committee in buildings, the buildings commissioner at the time, a lot of them pushed it off and said that this was the fault of the contractor, of city health officials for not planning effectively, because a lot of people just don't trust that the city is really monitoring these bad actors with any type of regularity. Did you get a sense of why so many community members and residents are against the demolition beyond just the potential consequences from a botched demolition? It seems like some don't want it to happen regardless of if the city does a kind of a good job of maintaining it or making sure it's as safe as possible for the community.
A lot of people were worried about the plans about the river. How are they going to stop debris from going into the river? They're saying that they're going to use water to weigh down dust, but where will that water go? Where will all that dirty water go once it is, weighing down all the dust? There was one representative, like I mentioned, from Matt Asphalt. They don't know what will happen to the site. And so I think that raised a lot of alarm for people, because they say, okay, well, why wouldn't Matt Asphalt build another industrial site that will only continue to pollute the area? And so that was, of course, a really large concern for people.
Did the representative from Matt give any tentative plans on what the company might want to do with it? Did they seem open to listening to the community? Was there any sense that, because I also know some advocates have pushed for them to sell it back to the state, or the state to negotiate another sale of this property? Did Matt seem open to any type of community input, whether it was selling the property off for public use or building something of public use on it post demolition?
Yeah, the representative seemed very
tight-lipped.
Yes, they have no idea what the owner is planning to do. City officials stepped in and also reminded folks that no matter what the plans are, they will have to be in communication with the city. Like, the city would have to approve of any permits, right, of whatever they plan to build if and when this demolition occurs. They did not say anything about selling the land, but I do know that in other reports, the Matt Asphalt owner has said to the Sun-Times that they do not plan on selling it. And so there was a lot of concern. A lot of people see the Damen silos as this significant landmark for good reason. It's part of the Southwest Side skyline in a way. It's something that, we mentioned that you see off the I-55. It's something you see off the Orange Line. There's so much art on it. Aside from it kind of being a part of like Chicago culture in the last few decades, it is a very historic building.
In 2023, the silos were named one of the state's most endangered historic places as like an attempt to bring more attention to the silos. The main focus is that they've been abandoned, that they're not in use. I don't think a ton of people know their significance or their history at this point. Was there anybody at the meeting who could speak to their long history and why they should be preserved, why they should be a landmark, 50, 60 years after their intended purpose is gone?
Yeah, so like the first person to speak at the meeting in the public comment section was the Preservation Chicago Executive Director, Ward Miller, who the city officials that were on the board were very familiar with him because I'm sure he's spoken at many of these meetings. He talked about how it is one of the last remaining monuments of Chicago's history and dominance in the national grain industry. These grain elevators were not only supplying the city and the area, but the nation. Bakeries across the United States, they were getting grain that was coming from our silos. There's plenty of people that came after Ward Miller to talk to these people about why these buildings, why these structures matter to them. I think the person that really stood out to me the most was Jenny Guzman. She talked about all the other industrial sites all over the country and the world that have had similar silos, have had similar structures, and how they've turned into successful green event spaces. The McKinley Park Development Council had talked about wanting this to be part event, festival venue space and part public green space for the community. And honestly, I personally thought that was a great idea because we are constantly talking about on the show about festivals coming into, Chicago parks and the back and forth with community and residents, with these large festival producers, and the positive and the negative impacts that can have on communities. And it just feels like having an extra place where we can host large scale events is an excellent idea. But of course, at this point, it just feels like the city was like, this isn't our land anymore. This is Matt Asphalt's land.
That's the sense that I had gotten. Again, this is a story we've been covering for the last 3+ years. Any video you see about the Damen silos, people are like, oh, it's finally going to be torn down. All of the commenters are like, we've been hearing this for years and years and years. And even before this sale, there have always been rumblings, throughout my life that it would eventually be torn down and replaced. But as I read through people's desire to preserve it, there really doesn't seem to be any momentum on the city's end, on Matt Asphalt's end, to kind of capitulate to what the public or what the neighborhood wants. I mean, there is still a chance that Matt Asphalt will do something closer to like a salt shed, even though the salt shed was a redevelopment of the former warehouse. There is a chance that they could erect something for the public use, but it doesn't seem likely at all. I do know that based on the current agreements for the demolition, they will have to erect some type of commemorative plaque, some type of educational materials on the site so that people are familiar with what the history was. But I'd love to hear from some of the other CityCast Chicago team members on why the silos are significant to you, to other Chicagoans, what your memories are of them, and how you'd want to see them developed. I can start with our social media manager, Rick Homuth.
Hey guys, thanks Jacoby. I think the space is perfect for the world's largest small cheval. I think we could all appreciate something like that.
It wouldn't be a conversation if you didn't take a shot at small cheval. I kind of love that as like a running joke at this point.
Unfortunately, I understand where people are coming from when they say they want to preserve it. You know, on one hand, there's still similar industrial buildings and grain elevators and that sort of thing further south, all the way into Indiana. So you might think, why is this one so special? But on the other hand, I feel like it's easy to dismiss those preservation needs until one day we wake up and they're all gone. So I would love to see some sort of like high density affordable housing built on that space that integrates the remaining structures in some way. I think it's pretty close to transit. It straddles those two neighborhoods. I think that'd be the best way to maximize that parcel of land, ideally with some, green space involved within it.
One of the articles I was reading talked about how the silos have been repurposed in other places. They've been turned into museums from Minnesota to South Africa. In Akron, one of these like former elevators was converted into housing, and I think is now dorm space for one of their universities. And so people have been creative with what they've done, whether they've torn down the building or if they've preserved sections of it. And so, of course, now that the city has approved the demolition, anything involving the actual silos, let's be real, seems especially unlikely. But Rick, have you ever visited the site?
So I've been to the Damen silos dozens of times. I think the first time I went was in 2011 when I was a freshman in college. A friend of mine saw an ad on Craigslist made by somebody who was actually living there and wanted to sublet their space. So we hopped on the Orange Line, showed up, checked it out, and what my friend didn't realize was that the living space was literally a squat, and the person who maintained it was more or less a prepper who was going train hopping south for the winter and just wanted someone to keep an eye on their stuff in the meantime. It was, as far as squats go, it was pretty nice. They'd spliced into like a street lamp out front so they could like steal electricity. My friend, if you can believe it, did not jump at that opportunity to move into an abandoned building right before winter, but we kept going back for years. It was just like a good spot for like generator gigs too, like DIY punk bands that didn't want to deal with music venues would just hook up their amps to like a gas generator. This was well before they hired private security to patrol the silos, so if the cops didn't see you when you were sneaking in, you were pretty much in the clear. This was sort of the Wild West before, I don't know exactly, but it feels like the Transformers set back in 2014 was sort of the turning point. I remember we all got up early and rode our bikes out to the Damen silos so we could watch the detonation too, which was pretty funny. We had all kind of heard rumors that they were going to level the facility completely. So the resulting destruction was just like this kind of tiny artificial bridge in between the two buildings, and that was kind of pretty dinky in comparison.
Mm-hmm. I think what's always funny about looking back on those Transformer images is it was supposed to be set in Hong Kong, but they never cut out the Sears Tower. And so they're supposed to be in Hong Kong, but there's a little glimpse that's like, you on 28th and Damen. I see exactly where you are. You on the river.
Right.
I want to bring in our Hey Chicago newsletter editor, Emmy Mack. Emmy, do you have any memories of visiting the Damen silos coming up?
Yeah, I had probably what was one of the most spiritual moments of my life there when I was a junior in high school. One of my best friend's dads died that week, and we all were trying to cheer him up. So we drove to Indiana and we all picked up a bunch of fireworks. And he was, totally miserable. We dragged him out to the silos and we're blowing them up at dusk and just trying to kind of like make him smile and stuff. And then it started raining. So then we went kind of underneath the silos into the really low ceiling. You kind of like crawl through a hole. And then we lit off the fireworks inside of there. And we're basically like running around choking on green smoke. And like we finally got him to kind of like cry a little bit. And it was just like really intense. And it was such a core memory of kind of our adolescence. We started going to the Damen silos, when we were juniors. And I didn't know how to drive. Some of the boys that I knew from Evanston did. We called them the Evanston boys, obviously. So the Evanston boys would come pick us up and take us to new parts of the city that as Northsiders, like I was never hanging over there. We probably went some Saturday afternoon by chance and then kind of kept going back a lot for this one summer of our lives. I don't even really talk to most of the group that I used to hang out at the Damen Silos with, but I think about them a lot. And I think about those times we spent, one time, just once, I climbed to the roof on the fire escape, which was pretty much missing as many rungs as it had left. And so a lot of the rungs were only connected on one side. So you had to be really careful and test each rung with your hand before putting your full weight on it. And obviously I was in platform shoes and everybody was so far ahead of me at the top, like, come on, what are you waiting for? And I was like, okay, guys, like, I'm a girl.
I love the amount of danger you've put yourself in throughout this story, starting with the blowing off fireworks inside. I do like the idea of it becoming a public art park. Because when I look at the pictures of the silos, first thing I think of, that would be a great place to play paintball. Like that'd be a great place to like run around the course if there were like obstacles set up. But given how like deep the connection is to young artists and just artists across the city, I love for it to be a continued public art park, maybe split between like green space on the outside, but then parts of the inside building could be designated for muralists. And I understand that a part of the allure of doing like graffiti and doing public art is that you are like, kind of doing it like against the permission of whoever owns the building. But I love the idea if this was set up as a public art space where people could do things like paintball, they could spray paint, they could come in and do mural exhibitions. I'd love if it had a maybe a graffiti museum feel to it. There isn't a singular place where you can experience all of the different like styles of graffiti, style of mural art in the city. And so I'd love just one place that was dedicated to the various graffiti artists, maybe in a more organized way. I don't know how you would do that, like how you keep people from tagging over others' works and things like that. But that's what I would do. I would give it back to the graffiti artists, the skaters, the paintballers, similar to parts of Big Marsh Park, I think. Michelle, you never said what you'd want the Damen Silos to be if you had it your way.
Even though I say that the Damen Silos are right by a community, there's still a good amount of space before you get to the first home on both sides, because it is down that strip of Damen. There is a lot of other warehouses and similar kind of like plants in that area. And so I think it would be an ideal festival spot where people wouldn't be annoyed by loud music.
You still get that Chicago skyline in the background.
You have the beautiful access to the river. I think making here on the south side, it's very hard to access the river. There is the South Branch kind of closer to the Bridgeport Art Center where you can access the river. Right there in the Bubbly Creek, there is like a park there. And then obviously the river passes through Ping Tom Park in Chinatown. I think having this as a point of access to the river is my biggest dream. The idea of it being like 1/4 venue and 3/4 just public green space, public park where you can access the river is like my biggest dream. Like I would go all in, invest in getting a kayak somehow, and just like be on the river all the time.
Before we get out of here, please bookmark our website, chicago.citycast.fm. There you can subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, check out our neighborhood and walking guides. And if you got it like that, consider signing up for our CityCast Chicago Neighbors program. That's our membership where you can get exclusive bonus content, ad-free listening, and neighbors-only events starting at just $10 a month or $100 for the year. Of course, I ain't gonna let you get out of here without some good news. Tonight, you can catch Michaela Loach, author of It's Not That Radical, Climate Action to Change the World at Pilsen Community Books. She's gonna be in conversation with environmental justice organizer Oscar Sanchez. That's tonight at 7 o'clock. Pilsen Community Books has events every single week, so check out their website for more information. As always, we appreciate you for listening and reading. We're gonna be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.